I've always found peace in late-night walks. There's something about the quiet that makes everything feel more manageable. I've been a welder for over 40 years now. It's all I've ever known. I live alone on a sprawling farm, just me and my dog Bosley. The house is far too large for one person, but I never had the heart to downsize after Maria passed. My kids moved out long ago, and since cancer took her, it's been just me and Bosley. One evening, after a long day in the shop, I decided to take a walk. My property's big enough that a single loop is usually enough to clear my head. The air was cool, and Bosley trotted happily at my side. Sometimes, I think he enjoys my company more than I enjoy his. I've walked that loop hundreds of times, but as I neared the house, something caught my eye. I looked up at the second-story window, the one from our bedroom. For a split second, I thought I saw movement. I froze, staring at that window. There was no reason anyone should be in there. I hadn't set foot in that room for years, couldn't bring myself to. Anger bubbled up in me at the thought of some intruder in my house. I wasn't going to stand for that. I rushed inside, heart pounding, and ran upstairs. The room was just as I had left it, empty, untouched. There was nothing out of place. I looked everywhere but found nothing. Yes, I was shaken, but mostly angry. I figured it was nothing more than a trick of the mind. I stood there for a while, feeling foolish, but couldn't shake the sense that something had been there. The next night, I woke to Bosley growling. He's a good dog, never barks without reason. I sat up in bed, listening. Then I heard creaking from upstairs. It could have been the old house settling, but my mind immediately went to footsteps, slow and deliberate, coming from right above me. I'm sure you can guess which room that was. I thought about grabbing my hunting rifle, but I wasn't ready to go that far. If it came to it, I was confident I could handle whatever was up there, mano a mano. I grabbed my flashlight and went to check again. Nothing. The room was exactly as it should be. My anger was turning to anxiety. Something didn't feel right. The following night, I came downstairs to find the kitchen lights on. I'm certain I turned them off before bed. I don't leave lights on. There was no question anymore. Someone had been in my house. Panic set in. I called the police, told them I thought someone was sneaking around. They came out, searched the house from top to bottom, but found nothing. They were polite, told me to call again if I needed them, but I could tell they didn't believe me. The next night was the worst. I couldn't sleep, so I decided to check the bedroom again. I don't know why. Maybe I thought it would ease my mind. But when I opened the door, I froze. There were clothes scattered all over the floor, Maria's clothes. I had packed them away after she died. Now they were everywhere. Then I saw her, a woman, standing in the doorway, just staring at me. I couldn't see her face clearly, but I knew it wasn't Maria. She was too short. I don't know who she was, but she didn't belong there. I've never been more terrified in my life. Without thinking, I charged at her. She turned and bolted down the stairs, out the front door. By the time I got outside, she was gone. I searched the property with Bosley, but there was no sign of her. I didn't sleep that night. For months, I didn't sleep. I was on edge, convinced I could hear footsteps upstairs every night. Every creak, every whisper of wind made me jump. I kept my rifle close by, terrified that I'd need it one night. I even thought about calling my brother to stay with me, but I wasn't going to do that. I was raised to handle my own, and so I did. But the nightmare didn't end. One night I was sitting in the living room when I noticed a figure standing in the yard, staring straight at me through the window. It was her again. My heart stopped. I grabbed my hunting rifle and ran outside, Bosley right behind me. She was still there, just a shadow in the moonlight, watching me. I fired a few shots into the air, hoping to scare her off. It worked. She turned and vanished into the darkness. But it didn't make me feel any better. I was being tormented by some stranger, probably homeless. I couldn't understand why this was happening to me. I stood there for what felt like forever, waiting to see if she'd come back. She never did. I haven't seen her since, but I know it's only a matter of time. I'm ready to defend myself. But I don't think living in this constant anxiety is sustainable. Thank God for Bosley. I have no idea what I'd do without him. I work for a catering service, so I'm on the road a lot, usually late at night. My job involves hauling gear back and forth in a massive truck the company forces me to drive. It's not the worst gig, but the hours are grueling, and it's far from the life I envisioned. By the time I get home, I'm either too wired from caffeine to sleep, or I pass out as soon as my head hits the pillow, staying out for 12 hours straight. One night I was driving home around 2 a.m. and felt the effects of too many Red Bulls. There was no way I'd get any sleep. On top of that, I hadn't eaten in hours, and my stomach was growling. There's a McDonald's just off the highway about 10 minutes from my place. It's my usual stop for late night snacks since it's open 24/7. And while I don't usually binge on fast food, I sometimes crave just a handful of fries. When I pulled into the drive-thru, it was after 2 a.m., and there were a few cars ahead of me. I was surprised. McDonald's isn't typically busy at that hour on a Tuesday. While waiting, I noticed something odd. An old, beat-up Volkswagen with tinted windows parked in the far corner of the lot. Since the McDonald's was only accepting drive-thru orders at this time, it didn't make sense for there to be a car in the lot. The employee parking spots were on the other side. It didn't seem like it belonged there, but I figured it was someone eating in their car. Nothing too strange. I grabbed my food and started driving away, not ready to go home yet, but not wanting to just sit idly either. I thought about a good spot to eat. There's a large nature preserve near my house, nestled on a mountain with a scenic lookout point at the top. The area is usually quiet after hours, and the road that loops around it takes you straight to the peak. The preserve was closed, but it's a good spot for some quiet time, so I figured I'd head up there to wind down and relive some high school memories. When I arrived at the preserve's parking area, it was completely empty, which was unusual. It wasn't a formal lot, just a gravel patch off the road. I was about to turn off the engine when I saw headlights pulling in. It was unsettling. Who else would be here at 2 a.m.? When I looked closely, I realized it was that same Volkswagen from McDonald's. My heart started racing. What were the odds? Had they followed me? I sat there staring at the car, half wondering if I was overreacting. After a minute of nothing happening, I thought I was just being paranoid. But when my friend Sebastian picked up my FaceTime call, I felt better. He said he'd come by in 10 minutes, and I agreed to wait. As I kept an eye on the Volkswagen, it still hadn't moved. When Sebastian finally arrived, we got out of our cars and started walking up the path. But before we were fully out of sight, I glanced back at the lot. I froze. The Volkswagen's 4 doors opened at once, and 4 guys stepped out. They didn't speak, just stared at each other for a few moments, which felt like an eternity. I nudged Sebastian, and he saw it too. Without saying a word, we kept walking. At the top of the mountain, we found a spot to sit, but the feeling of unease lingered. Just as I thought I'd relaxed, I heard voices coming from below. I turned to see 3 guys walking up the path, passing a blunt between them. They seemed friendly enough, and they asked if we wanted to smoke. We politely declined, but then one of them called us lame. Curious, I blurted out a question. "What were you doing at McDonald's?" The guy holding the blunt's expression shifted instantly. His smile vanished, and the others looked equally uncomfortable. For a long moment, none of them spoke. Then I remembered. There had been 4 guys in the Volkswagen. 3 were here, but 1 was missing. My instincts screamed that something was wrong. Before I could react, the guy who had been holding the blunt pulled his hoodie up, revealing a McDonald's uniform. "I work nights there," he said. "Just came here after my shift to hang out with my friends." I was a little relieved, but still unsettled. The whole situation felt off. We decided it was time to go. As we started walking down the path, Sebastian pointed into the trees. I followed his gaze and saw the 4th guy, barely visible, holding something in his hand. My heart skipped a beat. Before I could process it, the guy started moving toward us, and I knew it was time to run. We bolted, racing down the path, with the sound of footsteps closing in behind us. My pulse was pounding in my ears as I pushed myself faster. We reached the parking lot, jumped into our cars, and sped off. I wasn't sure if they were following us, but I wasn't going to take any chances. I called Sebastian, and we decided to meet at his place, just to be safe. When we finally regrouped, we were still shaken. The next day, we went back to the McDonald's to report what happened. The employee we spoke to showed us a photo of the guy who'd been with the group. Apparently, he had a history of harassment. After his girlfriend who worked there dumped him, he began stalking her. He'd even been violating a restraining order. That night still haunts me. I'll never know for sure what they were planning, but I'm grateful I made it out. A while ago, my friends and I, Luna, Gina, Johnny, Max, Allie, and I, used to sneak into abandoned buildings for fun. One fall night, we decided to explore an old church in Narberth, Pennsylvania, at 198th Elmwood Avenue. The place was creepy but familiar, and we'd snuck in through a boarded-up window before. Inside, the first floor had no real flooring, just dirt, with a set of stairs leading to the basement. We often hung out down there, drinking and laughing. But then, out of nowhere, a door slammed shut, loud enough to make our hearts race. Luna, Gina, and Johnny immediately bolted, but Max, Allie, and I decided to investigate. We found a small room with a dresser. The mirror on top had red stains, still sticky like they'd been left recently. There was also a creepy photo of a woman in a wedding dress on the dresser. The room felt off, and when we heard another noise from the other side of the basement, we quickly grabbed our things and ran. As we climbed the fence to leave, I looked back and thought I saw the silhouette of someone in the window. I've never been back to the church, and when I returned later, it was completely demolished. I'll never know what we saw that night, but I'm glad I wasn't alone.